Indigenous leaders were set to go to the Vatican in December to have a papal meeting. Is this still happening, or is this meeting with the Pope coming to Canada superseding the visit in December?
Yeah, I don't know. I think to the best of my knowledge, they would still plan their visit to Rome. There is a reason for that. It is up to them, but the Pope coming to Canada obviously would provide another opportunity, and obviously the request would be that the Holy Father present excuses, full and complete one, to Indigenous peoples on the territory.
Est-ce que vous avez?
Do you want me to say it again, Todd? Yeah, well, okay, I'll speak louder. It's the best way not to get clipped. The expectation is that the Holy Father present full and complete apology to Indigenous peoples on the territory in Canada. It is welcome news, and the question with respect to the visit to Rome by Indigenous leadership, to the best of my knowledge, is still on.
Comment vous réussissez?
Ben oui, absolument. C'était une des recommandations principales du rapport de commission et de vérité. Donc, des présentations sur le tort causé par le Saint-Père lui-même, c'est un élément constitutif puis très symbolique pour la réconciliation, c'est-à-dire la reconnaissance du tort causé par l'Église catholique.
Qu'est-ce que vous lui demandez?
Par exemple, la reine Elisabeth II devrait également s'excuser. On apprenait dans la biographie de l'ancien premier ministre Jean Chrétien que lui avait dissuadé la reine d'aller s'excuser aux Maoris en Nouvelle-Zélande à la demande du premier ministre de l'époque. Est-ce qu'il devrait y avoir des gestes de réconciliation faits par la reine également, que ce soit dans d'autres pays du Commonwealth, mais également au Canada?
Ben, je pense que d'abord et avant tout, peu importe la personne qui est interpellée, la reconnaissance du tort causé, même avant que le Canada existe, puis une partie constituante du Canada est très importante, mais les gens demandent aussi de passer à l'action. C'est pas une nouvelle que vous m'apprenez à ce qui a trait à la reine et les discussions que M. Chrétien a eues avec. Ce serait une décision que la reine elle-même pourrait prendre.
Monsieur Miller. Is there a mic here?
Is that a cabinet decision? Is it a Prime Minister's decision? Is it your decision? Is it Lametti's decision? I'm not really sure what's going on. Like, whose decision is it? And if the deadline's Friday, was it made today and you're just going to roll it out later in the week? Or what's going on there?
Well, the decision is yet to be made, and we'll know one way or another by Friday.
Monsieur...
The decision is the one of the government.
Monsieur Miller, maintenant que vous savez là, que le pape s'en vient, juste pour être clair, quel est votre message pour le pape à l'approche de sa visite?
Écoutez, je peux me tenir aujourd'hui devant vous en tant que ministre des Relations couronnes et autochtones et répéter ce qui est demandé suite à la commission Vérité et Réconciliation, c'est-à-dire que le Saint-Père lui-même se présente au Canada, sur le territoire, pour reconnaître le tort causé par l'Église aux peuples autochtones. Ce n'est pas à moi, en ma capacité personnelle ou en tant que ministre de la Couronne, de le demander. C'est une demande qui vient des peuples autochtones eux-mêmes. Je sais très bien que les opinions sont partagées là-dessus, mais dans tout processus de réconciliation, cette reconnaissance du tort causé, notamment par l'Église catholique, sachez que les autres églises ont présenté des excuses complètes. C'est un début, mais ce n'est qu'un début.
Est-ce que vous avez...
S'il ne s'excuse pas, est-ce que ça serait une occasion
Je ne vais pas spéculer sur ce que le Saint-Père dira ou dirait à l'occasion de sa présence sur le territoire canadien.
It sounds like there's still a lot of questions about how and when this is going to happen. So what is it that you want to know? What do you want to hear from the Catholic Church about how this is all going to work?
Well, I think to repeat what I said in French, full, complete recognition of the harm caused by the residential schools operated by the Catholic churches is the first step in a process of recognition of harm done and a step towards reconciliation, which includes reparations. And that, I think, is the natural next discussion. First and foremost, as the head of the Catholic Church, the Holy Father's recognition of such is key in a full and complete way in front of Indigenous peoples whose who are either suffering, who have suffered the harm, or suffering in silence, or are suffering intergenerational trauma. There is that importance of the symbolism, which has real and concrete repercussions for how we move ahead as a country.
Will the government be reaching out to the Vatican to find out any specifics on?
Well, there'll be obviously someone like the Holy Father doesn't show up by surprise in Canada, and there are discussions that are ongoing, but we won't be sharing them publicly. And if there are elements to share, we absolutely will.
Les annonces au début des matchs des Canadiens de Montréal, je ne sais pas si vous avez entendu la semaine dernière, la semaine précédente, l'annonceur dire que le centre belge se situe sur un territoire autochtone non cédé. Ça a suscité des réactions au sein de la classe politique québécoise. Vous, est-ce que vous avez vu cette initiative-là comme une bonne initiative?
D'abord et avant tout, j'ai vu le geste du Canadien de Montréal comme un geste profond de reconnaissance des territoires autochtones sur lesquels se trouve le Centre Bell. Écoutez, si on regarde l'histoire du Canada et du Québec pour autant, les gens qui pensent que Jeff Molson a donné le territoire montréalais aux Mohawks, c'est peut-être les mêmes gens qui peuvent croire que Louis XV, un jeune roi de 7 ans, peut donner le territoire de la seigneurie d'Oka aux Sulpiciens sous les pieds des Mohawks de Ganasatagé, mais pourtant c'est arrivé. Alors, tout ça pour dire que si les gens scrutaient autant à la loupe le geste très symbolique, très important de M. Molson et de la direction du Canadien, il l'appliquait avec la même rigueur sur ce qui a été fait par que ce soit Louis XIV ou Louis XV en ce qui a trait aux seigneuries à Ganawagi ou à Ganasatagé. Je pense qu'on serait plus avancé dans la réconciliation parce que il y a vraiment des questions à se poser sur ça. Et c'est des questions, j'ai fait ça à la blague, mais c'est des questions qui perdurent aujourd'hui quant au grief du territoire, que ce soit Ganawagi ou Ganasatagé, et que ça blesse encore. Cette reconnaissance du fait que ça blesse, c'est très important. D'où l'importance de la reconnaissance de l'État général des Canadiens. Et même sachant qu'il y a beaucoup de gens à Ganawagi qui défendent des Bruins, c'était un geste fort conciliateur.
Minister Miller, President from PTN News, you and the Pope would be a visitor, correct? Next decision would be an apology and reparations, but are you willing to make that a requirement for the Pope to visit Canada because he is a visitor and the Church has shown it needs to be pushed on certain things? So would you make that a requirement for him to come visit?
Look, as a non-Catholic, I have a lot of discomfort and I've been quite clear on what I expect the Holy Father to do with respect to Indigenous peoples, but imposing conditions on a religious order as a minister of the Crown is something that I do with a lot of trepidation, and I think all these things can be discussed. And obviously, the request that it be made is quite clear, and I truly believe in the good faith of the Holy Father. Well, I think a lot of pressure has already been exerted, and life is absolutely about choices, and I think it's a choice that first and foremost is self-imposed as the leader of the faith and realizing harm caused. I think there's a lot of hope that was expressed by believers in this new Pope, and I think that's something that comes first and foremost from believers and is self-imposed, and that requirement is most and best articulated by Indigenous leaders. All that to say, I think people would and I don't like engaging in hypotheticals, but I think people would be highly disappointed were the Holy Father to come to Canada and those excuses not be presented. These things are matters of diplomatic arrangements and who pays for what. While important for taxpayers, is a matter of courtesy that we extend to visiting diplomats from all over the world.
Or
Our agenda on climate change is very clear. We have an ambitious plan, and what we've heard during the election campaign is that Canadians from coast to coast to coast want governments, not just the federal government, but all governments, to do more in the fight against climate change. Oil companies recognize that we need to do more, and many of them have actually signed on to net zero commitment. The newly elected mayor of Calgary, one of her first decision into office was to adopt a resolution on the climate emergency. So I think I would be happy to. I'm disappointed that the Premier Kenney won't be in Glasgow. Other premiers will be there, but I would be happy to sit down with Premier Kenney and with other provincial premiers and environment ministers to talk about how we can work together in the fight against climate change.
Your party promised declining 5-year targets for emissions. Does that mean no more projects in the oil sands?
As you well know, federal government has power over pollution, but provincial governments have power over production, constitutional powers. So what it means is that we will ensure through legislation or regulation, it's something we will need to develop, that emissions from oil and gas in Canada are capped at current levels and diminish over time. Now, how different companies decide to go about doing that will need to be defined, but we're not trying to cap production. We will be capping the amount of pollution that comes from those sectors.
What about natural gas? Does it have a role to play as a break fuel? You proposed oil pipelines in the past. What about natural gas?
We have to reduce fossil fuel emissions, all fossil fuels, and as we've promised during the campaign, the cap will be on the oil and gas sector, not just on oil, but on gas as well. Natural gas emits greenhouse gas; it contributes to climate change, and we have to reduce those emissions, just like we have to reduce all emissions.
COP26 is this week. What are you hoping that Canada gets out of this summit? What are the priorities?
Well, as many of you know, I have attended a number of these conferences over the years, and what we've seen over the recent years is the fact that Canada now is recognized as a significant player at these negotiations, which is why my friend and colleague, Minister Wilkinson, was asked to co-chair one of the most a working group on one of the most important element of the negotiations in Glasgow, which is to secure $100 billion of funds from industrialized countries to help developing countries face the threat of climate change. This is a promise that we made collectively in 2009. So I think Canada, we've been doing a lot of things when it comes to climate change. Recently, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, said that if all G20 countries adopted a similar carbon pricing system as we have in Canada, globally we would be 2/3 of the way to meeting our Paris target. So I think Canada can contribute internationally. We have to do more in Canada, just like we have to do more internationally, and that's the spirit that will guide us going into Glasgow next week. Je pense que c'est une conférence. Toutes ces conférences-là sont importantes, mais je pense que celle-là l'est plus que certaine. Le rôle du Canada est très important. On a demandé à mon collègue et ami, le ministre Wilkinson, de co-présider un groupe de travail sur un des éléments les plus importants de la négociation, soit le fameux 100 milliards de dollars que les pays industrialisés sont engagés à offrir aux pays en voie de développement pour les aider à faire face au changement climatique. Or, on a appris cette semaine qu'il y avait eu un accord. Donc, tout ça va se concrétiser lors de la conférence de Glasgow. Écoutez, tout le monde doit faire plus dans le cadre de la lutte au changement climatique. Nous devons faire plus ici au Canada, certainement, mais il faut que la communauté internationale fasse plus. Il faut accélérer le pas et c'est ce qui va guider notre travail au cours des deux semaines après ce début.
Un projet rejeté par Québec. Pourquoi poursuivre cette évaluation alors que le gouvernement du Québec a dit non?
Écoutez, très simplement parce que le projet, donc la procédure d'évaluation environnementale au fédéral fait en sorte que lorsqu'un promoteur dépose un projet, nous devons considérer que le projet est toujours sous étude jusqu'à ce que le dit promoteur le retire. Donc, Énergie Saguenay n'a pas retiré son projet, alors l'évaluation fédérale va se poursuivre, à moins qu'effectivement l'entreprise décide de retirer le projet de l'évaluation environnementale.
campaigner and activist makes some in the energy sector nervous about how you're going to carry through your role as minister.
I'm sorry,
Do you understand how your past as an activist, as an environmental campaigner, makes some in the energy sector worried about the kind of policies you're going to bring about as environment minister?
Our plan on climate change is very clear, and most of it is already known. I mean, we've put a price on pollution, and we will continue to increase this price on pollution. We want more transit. We want more clean energy. We want more renewable energies, and we want less pollution. We want less methane pollution, which is it's a very powerful greenhouse gas. So it's not. I don't have a secret agenda as environment minister. It's a government effort to tackle this, what many consider one of humanity's greatest challenge, which is climate change. And as an environmentalist, I have worked with provincial governments. I was on stage with Rachel Notley in 2015, supporting her climate change plan because I thought it had lots of good elements. I didn't necessarily agree with everything, but she wanted to phase out coal from the electricity sector in Alberta. She wanted to put a price on carbon. She wanted to put a cap on emissions from the oil sand sector. So I have shown in the past the ability to work with provinces all across the country and with companies as well. I was an advisor to a clean venture fund that has invested money in Alberta in the clean energy sector. So I'm willing to sit down and work with anyone in the country who wants to fight to work with us to fight against climate change. Merci beaucoup.
Hello again, I'm Martin Stringer, and you've been watching the new Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, now coming out from the first meeting of the new Trudeau cabinet. Our health ministers, Jean-Yves Duclos, he is going to take the microphone. Let's listen into questions from reporters as they come to the microphone and take questions.
Donc, tu pourrais continuer ici. Ben, merci pour la question. Ça tombe très bien parce que je suis en compagnie de Madame... Pardon. Voilà. Donc, ça tombe très bien parce que je suis en compagnie de Mme Bennett, qui est non seulement une experte, mais aussi très crédible, une médecin de formation et qui connaît très bien comment les gouvernements fonctionnent et qui a travaillé très fort au cours des années à établir des relations entre les provinces et les territoires et le gouvernement canadien. Mais on l'a vu durant la pandémie, la santé mentale et la santé physique, ça va ensemble. Il y a eu des conséquences majeures, des fractures importantes reliées à la pandémie qu'on a vécues et qui vont persister encore un certain temps. Et toutes les provinces et tous les territoires sont intéressés à investir davantage en santé mentale. C'est une occasion de collaborer pour le bénéfice de tous les Canadiens et toutes les Canadiennes, mais je pense que Caroline, tu pourrais très bien compléter.
Oui, je pense que maintenant, c'est une pandémie parallèle avec dans le domaine de la santé mentale et aussi c'est un aspect de notre plateforme très fort avec les subventions pour les provinces et territoires et le travail en partenaire avec les provinces et territoires et des populations très impliquées dans ce domaine.
Mais Monsieur Duclos, qu'est-ce que vous faites quand même de la question des compétences? Parce que ça reste une compétence provinciale dont vous voulez vous mêler. Vous avez entendu Monsieur Legault pendant la campagne électorale. Alors, comment ça se fait que vous pensez que vous pouvez aller jusque-là, jusqu'à créer un deuxième ministère fédéral de la Santé?
Bien, ici, il y a deux mots-clés, deux ensembles de mots-clés. Un, c'est respect des compétences et deux, responsabilité partagée. Parce qu'au Canada, les gens s'attendent à ce que les gouvernements collaborent lorsque les gens sont les mêmes, et c'est le cas, et lorsque les objectifs et les besoins sont les mêmes partout au pays.
Et encore une fois, c'est très important pour la famille fédérale d'avoir une stratégie dans le domaine de la santé mentale travers le gouvernement du Canada. C'est un défi comme des appels à l'action de la Commission de vérité et réconciliation et aussi dans le domaine des femmes et filles assassinées et disparues.
Ontario's health minister today said that Pfizer will very shortly be approved for kids 5 to 11. Do you have a more precise timeline on that?
Well, as we know, the necessary information was sent to Health Canada just a few weeks ago in mid-October. Health Canada is obviously looking into this very seriously, pondering both the effectiveness and the safety of the vaccine for young children, for children aged 5 to 11, and they will have further news to report as soon as they can.
But no timeline, is that days? Is it still weeks?
It will take the time that they need to do the analysis appropriately.
Mr. Duclos, do you have a date yet for when the sit down with provinces and talk about health transfers, increasing health transfers that the province going to get involved?
Well, we'll do this quite quickly because we know it's important for them, it's important for Canadians as well. We have a significant platform both on physical and mental health that we know is going to benefit all Canadians, and to do this effectively, as I said in French, we need to recognize not only the shared responsibility, but the fact that the jurisdiction is, in terms of management and implementation, is in the domain of provinces and territories. Oh, well, it will be ongoing. I'll be starting my conversations with my counterparts today, and Minister Bennett will do that as well. I'm sorry?
The government committed to doing the summit with the provinces on health transfers this fall. When is that summit?
Well, it will be obviously fixed and agreed to with provinces and territories, and when we have precise news, we'll make those news known.
Mais en fait, l'ajout de ce ministère-là va venir envenimer encore plus ces discussions-là, justement.
Au contraire, je pense que ça va améliorer la capacité d'avoir des résultats que tous et toutes veulent, peu importe qui on parle au Canada, peu importe le gouvernement provincial, on a tous les mêmes objectifs et tous les mêmes personnes que l'on veut servir. Alors je pense que ce sont des défis que les gens veulent relever par une collaboration entre les niveaux de gouvernement, mais toujours par un respect évidemment des compétences des provinces et des territoires.
I said I did a radio interview on CBC Calgary this morning where they asked me the same question, and what I said to him is, you know, my experience working with Minister Guilbeault over the last couple of years has been that he's a very pragmatic and thoughtful fellow, and I think that perhaps Mr. Kenney needs to dial down the rhetoric a little bit and sit down with Minister Guilbeault and have a conversation with him. But at the end of the day, I mean, the work that Minister Guilbeault does and the work that I will be doing with him is about trying to ensure that we're going to do what we need to do, what science tells us we have to do in terms of reducing emissions, but doing it in a way that's going to promote economic opportunity for all regions of the country. Certainly, as somebody who grew up in Saskatchewan, who represents a riding in British Columbia, that's very important for me.
Is natural gas still an important part of transition energy? Sorry, Ryan Cummings, National Post. Is natural gas still an important part of the transition? Can it play a role as you move forward on climate change?
Well, certainly natural gas plays a role in the context of the transition. You've seen some of, for example, coal-fired power plants moving towards refitting themselves to use natural gas. And so certainly as we move forward, we are looking at moving to lower emitting forms of energy. Ultimately, though, obviously by 2050, we have to get to a point where we are net zero. And that means that if you have, for example, natural gas power plants, they're going to have to capture their carbon. And ultimately, the focus is going to be far more on renewables than it is on combusting hydrocarbons.
There's a massive economic demand for that right now, though. Are you worried that sends the wrong message for some big projects that offer a lot of employment and a lot of transition jobs?
Well, at the end of the day, like I said, we are working on addressing the climate issue. That's a science issue. It's not a partisan issue. It's not a political issue. You have to find pathways to be able to achieve what we know scientists are telling us we have to achieve. But you have to do it in a manner that's going to promote economic prosperity. And within that frame, we're going to be working with all sectors of the economy.
Avec le passé de militant écologiste de M. Guilbeault, pensez-vous qu'il va être la bonne personne pour parler à l'industrie pétrolière et gazière être l'interlocuteur ou ça va être votre travail à vous, ça?
Well, probablement c'est les deux. Bien sûr, je suis le ministre de Ressources naturelles et une partie de ce travail, c'est de travailler sur le secteur d'énergie et d'avoir les conversations dans lesquelles on peut réduire les gaz à effet de serre, mais dans une manière qu'on peut avoir une économie forte. Mais bien sûr, dans le ministère de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique, M. Guilbeault doit aussi avoir les conversations. Quand j'étais le ministre de l'Environnement, j'ai beaucoup de conversations avec mon homologue à l'Alberta, M. Nixon. Et bien sûr, nous avons les choses dans lesquelles nous n'avons pas à avoir un accord, mais nous avons les conversations qui étaient très productives et je crois que M. Guilbeault va avoir les conversations comme ça aussi. So the campaign commitment was to effectively cap oil and gas emissions at current levels and then to have steps every 5 years down towards net zero. That's actually very much in accord with what the major energy companies in Calgary have already committed to, which is a net zero future. There are a number of ways in which to implement that, and certainly some of those are regulatory. We are going to be working through with the sector, but with others in terms of how we actually get that done, and that's going to be one of the priorities for both Minister Guilbeault and I over the coming months. All right, thank you.
We have said, the Prime Minister has said, Minister Miller has said publicly, I've said publicly, that we will compensate those children. That's part of the reconciliation process, part of the reconciliation agenda, and we take that very seriously. We hope to have a decision on the specific case in the coming days.
Don't you have to have a decision by Friday? So you've had a month to have discussions. Your deadline is Friday. Why do you not have an answer yet on whether or not you're going to appeal?
As I said, we will have an answer in coming days.
Pourquoi c'est aussi compliqué de prendre une décision, M. le ministre?
C'est un cas très complexe. C'est un cas très complexe. Faut lire le jugement. Je vais pas donner des détails ici parce que c'est tellement complexe, mais il y a des questions. Il y a des questions des compétences du tribunal, l'étendue des pouvoirs du tribunal. Il y a des questions sur la méthodologie de compensation et l'interaction avec les recours collectifs. Donc, c'est très, très complexe. On a des questions de précédent qui touchent non seulement, évidemment, les questions des jeunes autochtones qui ont été enlevés de leur famille, mais aussi d'autres cas de discrimination systématique dans le système. Donc, c'est très complexe.
Mais aussi, vous portez en appel le danger de perpétuer encore ce traumatisme de procédure. Est-ce que vous pouvez laisser en considération aussi autre que les considérations juridiques?
On va prendre tout en considération et comme j'ai dit, c'est une décision complexe. Le Premier ministre a souligné que nous allons compenser les jeunes enfants autochtones. C'est prioritaire, c'est primordial. On va le faire, mais il faut juste trouver la bonne voie pour aller en avant. No, we're looking at the totality of it. I say that as an easy shorthand to answer your questions, but we're looking at the whole complex case. Look, I'm not going to get into the actual. I've outlined that it's a complex decision. I've outlined why the decision has complexities at a variety of different places, and we are looking at it. I have reiterated what the Prime Minister and my colleagues have said, what I have said, that it is our intention to compensate, that we have accepted the finding of systemic discrimination by the tribunal. We need to work out the modalities of that, and we will have a decision in coming days.
It sounds like you think Canadians can't understand the complexities if you just explain it to them.
It is a complex decision. I can tell you that most lawyers would have difficulty understanding the complexities of it. But as I said, there are a number of different considerations. We're trying to take them all into account, and we'll have a decision in coming days.
Every appeal means Canadians are spending more money in legal fees and government fees. Do you have any estimate on how much the government has spent to fight this case in terms of costs for legal fees, reviewing, those types of things?
I don't have the figure in front of me. Again, it's been going on since 2007 when it began, and I appreciate that it is expensive. Je peux pas parler des détails, et comme j'ai dit, on va avoir une réponse dans les prochains jours.
Sur C22, est-ce que vous souhaitez un animal obligatoire, vous comptez redéposer un copier-coller de C22? Vous allez modifier le projet de loi?
Nous avons promis d'agir dans les 100 premiers jours. Donc je ne peux pas garantir que c'est copier-coller, mais ça peut être copier-coller. Mais on a décidé d'aller tout de suite de l'avant avec ce projet de loi.
Merci.
Merci. Thank you.